Hello everybody, my name is Davius Beck. I'm Novation Brand Ambassador and I'm here today to show you the Launchpad Pro. The Launchpads that Novation has made were primarily made to control Ableton Live, and the Launchpad Pro is no different in that regard, but there's a lot of new features and you can use a lot of this functionality with any DAW that you want or with external MIDI gear with these breakout MIDI cables. So let me just give you a quick rundown. We have 4 distinct modes on the Launchpad Pro, and by default, when you plug this into your computer, if you're using Ableton Live, you'll be seeing the session view. The session view on the Launchpad Pro mirrors the session view in Ableton Live. Each vertical column represents a different track, and each pad represents a clip inside of that track. Previous Launchpads didn't have RGB pads. The new Launchpad Pro does. So if you color code your clips, you'll be able to see those colors reflected here, which makes it a lot easier to stay organized. So I know that I have some audio clips here that I've organized by various sound type, and I've color coded them so I know exactly where to find them. I have some drum loops here, so just really quickly I'll launch a few of these drum loops. Have some melodic samples as well. When I'm ready to stop the clips, I have a dedicated stop clip button right here. If I press this, the bottom row of pads will change to stop clip buttons. So I can stop any clip that's playing on an individual track, or if I hit the scene launch button over here, it'll actually stop every single clip that I've played. You have additional buttons down here that let you access the mixer functions directly, so you don't have to go into a mixer mode and then the submenus there. Every mixer function has its own dedicated button. So if I hit the volume button, now, each vertical column represents the volume fader for that particular track. The Launchpad Pro is velocity sensitive, and you see this in a lot of different areas here. So for instance, if I want to change the volume on a track, the harder I hit, the more quickly the volume faders are going to react. If I tap this slightly, the volume fader will gradually go down or gradually go back up. This is really convenient if you want to do a gradual fade out at the end of a song or at the end of a show. Next to the volume button, I have a pan button, so this will allow me to pan my sounds left and right. If the 2 buttons are lit up in the middle, then your sound is panned to the center. And again, we can pan this left and right, and this movement is also velocity sensitive. Next to that, we have a sends button. So if you set up return channels in Ableton Live for external effects, things like delays and reverb, you can control up to 8 different sends. Each send knob is controlled by these scene launch buttons over here. So this would be send A, send B, etc. So if I want to send audio from one of my tracks to a return channel, all I have to do is just turn up the appropriate send, just like that for this track. And that's also velocity sensitive. Next to those buttons, we have solo and mute. So for the solo and the mute buttons, they just take up the bottom row. So you're able to solo a track while you can still launch other clips that are available. So again, this makes it really easy to focus on mixing while not losing your focus on actually playing and performing. We have a track select button. If you want to select a certain track so you can manipulate the effects on there, just hit track select. The bottom row will let you select a specific track. Now I have a record arm button as well. All the clips that I have right here that are already colored have clips inside of them, and they're audio tracks, so they have audio clips, different loops. My first 3 tracks are blank MIDI tracks. So if I want to be able to play the instruments that are on these tracks, I have to arm the track first. So I just hit my record arm button. The bottom row will let me arm any track that's available. So I'm going to arm a track here that has a drum rack on it, a little custom drum rack that I made myself. And I'm going to hit my note button. Now I'm in a note mode that will allow me to play this drum rack instrument. The drum racks in Ableton Live can hold up to 128 sounds. You have 64 pads here, so you're able to see 64 drum sounds at any particular time. And you can use the arrow keys to scroll through the sounds in the drum rack if you have more than 64 sounds. So, all right. So I'm going to start playing something. I'll record a drum beat to a clip, but it'll be helpful if I can hear the metronome. So I have a dedicated click button here that turns on my metronome. When I'm ready to record, I have a dedicated record button. This will create a brand new clip and allow me to start recording into it. When I hit the record button again, it'll stop recording and instantly play back that clip and keep looping it. So let me figure out what I want to do. All right. So I'll start recording. All right, we have this recorded. Now I can overdub into this as well. All right, so we have some variation there. Now really quickly, I'll just quickly mute that track so you guys can hear me. So again, I'm holding down the mute button right now, okay? I just went from the note view to the session view. If you hold the button down, these modes act as momentary toggles, meaning that instead of jumping to the session view and staying there, I can let go and go back to my note mode. Now, in this note mode, we have several buttons over here that will allow you to edit certain aspects of the MIDI clip. So for example, maybe this clip will be the introductory drum beat for my song. If I want to duplicate this clip and then start adding more stuff to it, I have a dedicated button here that says duplicate. I can press that. And now I have a second instance of that clip, and I can start recording and doing stuff with that without affecting the previous clip. So let me unmute this now. All right, so now if I go back to my session page here, I'll hit session. On this track now, I have two separate clips. I can use my arrow keys so I can see more than the 8 clip slots that are here, and I can navigate all throughout my set. I recorded 2 clips that are down here. If I want to switch between them, let me go ahead and unmute this. It's my first clip. And then when I'm ready, I can switch to my second clip with my big bass sound. Cool. All right, now I have 2 other MIDI tracks here that have melodic instruments. One has a piano sound and one has a bass sound that's called a funk mouth bass. These are sounds that actually come in Ableton Live's library. So if I want to arm one of those, again, I'll hit my record arm button. I will arm track 2. This has my bass sound. And if I go back into my note mode, the display is going to look a little bit different. Now what we have here is a chromatic note mode. So you see the different colors here, and they're showing you different information about the chromatic note mode. The pink button here shows you the key that you're in, okay? This is your tonic, and by default, this is C. When this is C, all the buttons that are lit up are like the white keys on the keyboard. All the ones that are dark are like the black keys on the keyboard. And you can easily transpose the root note by simply using the left and right arrow keys to shift it by semitones. Right now that's C. If I hit the arrow once, we see a purple button, and this is showing me how many semitones I've transposed the key that I'm in. So now instead of being in C, it's C sharp. What makes this a really convenient feature is that you can play the same notes in the same area, and once you learn certain shapes for basic scales, you can play in any key that you want to by playing the exact same pads. A quick example is this. A basic major scale would just be me hitting all the keys that are lit up. So that's a C major scale. If I want to play that in G major, I can just transpose this up by 7 semitones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now I can play a G major scale by hitting the exact same pads. So once you get used to it, this is a very intuitive way to play. And again, with the breakout MIDI cables, you're not restricted to just playing the instruments in Ableton Live. You could use this note mode to play any external synth that you want to. So if you're not necessarily a keyboard player, this note layout can make you sound a lot better than you might realize. So let me bring this back to the key of C. I will unmute my drums, and I'll get ready to record something with this bass sound. All right, I'll hit my record button and just start recording. I'm going to mute both of those really quickly. So I'm going to go back to my session page now. I'm going to launch the drum clip, the first one that I made that didn't have that little big boomy bass sound, so there's more room for my bass that I just recorded. And I'll move on to my first MIDI track, which has a different melodic sound, a piano. And I'll start to add that on top of everything else. When I'm ready, just hit my record button. All right. So now I have 3 different elements that I've recorded using MIDI. And again, the note mode is velocity sensitive. You also have aftertouch, which is also known as channel pressure. So for instruments in Ableton Live that will utilize aftertouch, you can go into your note mode, and the further in that you press, you're able to manipulate whatever aftertouch is assigned to. In this case, this piano sound that I have, let me go ahead and stop the clip that's playing there. All right, so if I go in here, let's unmute that track as well. All right, so my piano, I have aftertouch assigned to a morphable filter in Ableton Live. So if I press a note, and then I press in further, I'm able to manipulate that filter. As far as I know, I think this is the only pad-based controller that utilizes aftertouch. So this is a very nice feature to have in a package like this. So let's go back to my session page here. I'll unmute my tracks. I'll send some piano to a delay that I have with my sends. Add some reverb. And now I'll start to add some of the other audio clips that I mentioned earlier. I have a few pre-made drum loops that I have been using for different shows and demonstrations. So now I can add those to the MIDI clips that I just created. Now, let me stop the clips really quickly. So I talked about the session mode, I talked about the note mode. We have another button here that says device. In Ableton Live, all effects and instruments are known as devices. So if you want to control those devices, manipulate certain parameters of the device, you press the device button. And now each vertical row acts like a virtual knob or fader that will manipulate a device. Oftentimes you'll have multiple devices on a track. You might have an instrument followed by a number of effects. So you can use these arrow keys here to move through the devices that are on that track. Now the track that I'm currently on, this is my piano sound. I'm going to actually go back to my bass sound. So let me see, I'll hit my track select button. I'll select track 2. I'm holding it down, so when I let go, I'll go back to my device mode. I'm going to use my arrow keys so I can get to the macro knobs for this instrument. In Ableton Live, instrument racks will have macro knobs. There's 8 knobs, and those 8 knobs correspond to these 8 vertical columns. So let's go ahead and unmute my bass sound. I'll play it. There we go. So now I can manipulate certain aspects of this bass. And again, these all react to velocity. I can also automate any of these changes by simply hitting the record button, manipulate some things, turn record off, and things will be captured inside of the clip. So here's a good example. So now that automation has been captured, and let's see, oh, that's why. I have to arm the right track first, that might help. So let me hit record arm. I'm gonna arm track 2 to make sure we record that automation in our clip. And now, so now that automation has been captured, and you can see the automation reflected here, all right? Now the last mode that we have is called the user mode. The user mode is essentially a blank slate that you can use to program and MIDI map however you want. Oftentimes people will use the user mode as a way to get light feedback and create custom light shows, create visual metronomes, or just make their own custom setup so they can affect everything on one particular page. So very flexible, you can use it however you like. So these modes that I've shown you, these are the modes that will show up when you're plugged into Ableton Live. Now, like I said, you can use these different modes with any DAW or any other device if you want. The way you do that, there's a setup button right here. Might be a little bit hard to see. It sits flush against the face of the Launchpad Pro, so you don't accidentally hit it while you're performing. If I hold this down, these different buttons allow me to switch to different modes and also change the velocity sensitivity, which is here, change the aftertouch sensitivity, which is here, or assign the different external MIDI modes to specific MIDI channels. So for example, this first button up here, this is my Ableton Live mode. This second button allows me to use that same note mode that we were talking about, but with any external gear. The bottom 2 rows here will allow me to choose what MIDI channel my note mode is going to output to. So if I let go of this now, I'm just going to scroll and say note. And now there's my same chromatic note mode, still velocity sensitive, I still have aftertouch, but now instead of controlling specific things in Ableton Live, I can use this with any other DAW or with external MIDI gear. If I hold setup again, the third button over, this is a drum mode. Your drum mode sends MIDI note data, but it's organized in these 4 quadrants, so it's similar to looking at an MPC style drum machine. I hold setup again. My 4th mode, it says fader. The fader mode is the same as the device mode. The only difference is that this is intended for external MIDI devices or any other DAW. If I hold setup again, the last mode, this is a programmer mode, and this is basically the same as the user mode. It's a blank slate for you to program however you like. So it's an extremely flexible device, and again, you have the versatility to be able to use any program that you like or breathe some new life into some of your external MIDI gear that maybe you're not using quite as much. You have a new way to interact with it with this here. So the Launchpad Pro, it's a very flexible and unique way to control Ableton Live, other DAWs, and other devices. For more information about the Launchpad Pro, please visit fullcompass.com or contact your Full Compass sales pro. My name is Thavius Beck. Thank you very much.